Today's gospel reading gets us back into Mark's gospel, where we will be spending a lot of time during this season after Pentecost. Mark, that shortest of the Gospels, written with a sense of immediacy that pushes us, the reader, as quickly as it can to Holy Week and the miracle of the empty tomb. Throughout Mark's Gospel, the enemies, if you will, seem to be the Pharisees. They always seem to be opposed to Jesus and his ministry. When we think about Mark as a book, this is helpful. It's good to have an enemy, or maybe an antagonist would be a better word. An antagonist pitted against the hero to create a sense of tension. Rocky and Bullwinkle are great, but Natasha and Boris certainly do add something. Always looming, always creeping around. And you know that whenever they appear, something is going to happen. This is the general feeling of the Pharisees in Mark, the quick way we summarize who they are as we are reading the gospel, though in truth that's not a fair depiction of the Pharisees. Rabbi Joseph Telushkin writes that the most important thing to know about the Pharisees is that they are the ancestors of all contemporary Jews. This is because the other sects of Judaism that existed contemporaneously with them died out shortly after the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70. So once their contemporaries were gone, their practices became normative. Unfortunately, at the same time, Jews were being called Pharisees, and that word took on a highly pejorative meaning. In part, this is because of the New Testament's depiction of Pharisees as small-minded religious hypocrites. Eventually, the word Pharisee became synonymous with the word hypocrite. In actuality, however, some of the greatest teachers of Talmudic Judaism were Pharisees. The Pharisees' understanding of Judaism was characterized by their belief in oral law. They believed that when God gave the Torah to Moses, God also gave him an oral tradition that specialized precisely how its laws were to be carried out. For example, although the Torah demands an eye for an eye, the Pharisees maintained that God never intended for physical retribution. Rather, that the person who blinded was required to pay the victim the value of the lost eye. The Pharisees believed that the oral law empowered them to introduce necessary changes into Jewish law and to apply the law to new and unanticipated circumstances, to grow and to adapt. So the Pharisees were teachers of the law in a sect of Judaism that has become the norm since around the year 70. Though, as we read about them in Mark's Gospel, as Christians, we find them presented as the antagonist in the great story of God's salvation through the life and ministry of Jesus. Teaching kids about Pharisees typically elicits the same reaction as when children learn the word hypocrite, and then they run home and throw it at their parents because you tell me to eat vegetables, but then I watched and you don't eat vegetables. Hypocrite. I give you this backstory for a reason. Last Tuesday, during Bible study, we read our gospel reading from the second and third chapters of Mark's Gospel, and we were talking about the Pharisees' response to Jesus, why it is they went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against Jesus and how to destroy him. And I asked, why do you think they responded so strongly? What threat did Jesus pose? An answer I received was actually spot on. I think they were afraid of Jesus because they didn't want to lose their jobs. As I said, I think that's spot on. The Pharisees were teachers and authorities on the law and the oral law. They were the definitive authority, and here comes Jesus teaching something new. So they ask him, why were you breaking one of the 10 Commandments? And Jesus responds in an unexpected way. They ask him, which commandment is the greatest? And Jesus gives them an unexpected answer. And then they start asking him for signs. I don't think they are trying to trap or trick Jesus as much as they are arguing, but that's not the way we've ever understood this, and we've never done it that way before. They undoubtedly know the prophecies of the Messiah, and now Jesus is walking among them. It seems so easy as we read this in 2024 as Christians. Jesus is there. Just follow him. Just believe. But their tradition, their values, their self-identity, and their faith in the right way to do things will not let them take that step. And so throughout Mark's gospel, as Mark tells it, the Pharisees are tied to the past and trying to trick Jesus and serve as a disruption to the ministry at hand. They become part of the reason for his death. Consider this. We rolled out our strategic planning syllabus on January 28th, 2024. And for the last 4 months, we have been sharing memories and listing assets and thinking of steps forward. We have been dreaming up big ideas for our future and talking about where God is leading us. We have been reflecting on our purpose, that is to say, our why. We have been wrestling with our how, and then considering our what, that is to say, the activities and the ministries that help get us there. But now, let me ask you this question. Are we the Pharisees of our own story? Are we the ones getting in our own way? Are our traditions, are our long-held values, is the way that we've always done it, and our self-identity of who we have been getting in the way of what God is sending us now? The Pharisees ask Jesus, "Why are you breaking one of the 10 commandments?" And Jesus responds, "You're missing the point." They asked him, "Which commandment is the greatest?" And Jesus gave them a new commandment. That's the thing with the Pharisees. If they believed that Jesus is who Jesus says he is, then their entire world would change. No need for an authority or interpreter of the law, not with the Messiah walking around. So what would they be left with? Who are they if they lose their vocation and their sense of self, if their future doesn't look like their past? Who are we if our future doesn't look like our past? Reading Mark's Gospel in 2024, I think it's easy to be short-sighted, to write off the Pharisees, to say, come on, guys, it's going to get so much better because Jesus is here. Yeah, there will be ups and downs, but Jesus is here. It's easier to say that from the other side, from 2024, talking through time to the Pharisees in Mark's Gospel. But what about us here today? As we look to a future that is still hidden, in the changes, evolution, and trust that lies ahead for the people of Faith Lutheran Church, how will our story be written? It seems to me that the line between Pharisee and disciple is actually pretty thin. Nicodemus shows us that. Maybe it's simply the difference between digging in our heels or taking a step forward. Who are we if our future doesn't look like our past? We are the same people we have always been, followers of Jesus Christ, trusting where God is leading us. Thanks be to God. Amen.